Who the hell can wait till morning? Talk now at latenightsportsradio.com.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again to the Mad Scientist Sports Lab. I am the Mad Scientist of Sports, Nick Ficcarelli, the beacons of lights, the experiments in on the chalkboard, and of course, the test subjects. They always come rolling into the lab, and tonight, a little bit of a special place in my heart for this lab because it's going to be a little bit of a reunion to start the show. Now, for all those that don't know, for almost 2 years I had a show called TSC Saturday Night on the old Sports Chronicles radio network, and I had, two absolutely amazing, unbelievable co-hosts that anybody can ask for. One happens to be my lab assistant, who's a little late right now, in Andrew Glukov, who, of course, is having problems with Skype. Damn you Skype, damn you to heck. But the other guy that was a co-host of my show was actually one of the first people that I brought on when I was subbing for Quinn Jordan on his show when I was doing my NFL review. And he turned out to be one of my weekly panelists. He came aboard as the co-host of my show and for TSC Saturday Night. And then we co-hosted a show called the NFC West Recess, which was every Wednesday night at 11 p.m. Eastern Time, 8 p.m. Pacific Time. And it was an hour of pure frivolity and beating down the West Coast bias 1 week at a time. And we also were co-panelists on the old Football Radios Online and on a couple of other shows that right now really escape my mind right now. We did a lot of things together. And it was with great honor that he has agreed to, for one night only, be a co-host for the first half hour, along with me and my lab assistant, Drew. Ladies and gentlemen, I give to you the original doctor, the original student of the game, and now the pontificator of all things football. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Kyle Nash is in the lab.
Oh, man, talk about nostalgia. It is not a Nick Ficcarelli show without a long and honored introduction. Thanks for having me aboard, Nick. I'm ready to dig into some stuff and have some fun here in the lab tonight, man. It's a good time. With the beakers are going, I see only a few broken ones on the floor so far, so you're off to a good start. Let's get this rolling.
Well, being that it's only a few, it's because my bumbling lab assistant was trying to get things together for the show. And, oh, hey, Drew, how you doing?
Sorry. My bad.
As everybody, for all those that do remember TSC Saturday Night, there always seems to be one dumpster fire on the show, and, well, I think it just happened. So the beacons are now officially back where they're supposed to be and everything like that. But let's get things started, guys. A couple of weeks ago, we had, me and Andrew had Phil Nagley on our show to talk about the FIFA scandal. And, a couple of weeks have passed, and, all of a sudden, Jack Warner, the former head of CONCACAF, which is the North American Soccer Federation, said, I will spill everything. It is about time. I'm not to be afraid. It's about time that I do everything. And then we find out a couple of days later that he is not going to say anything. He wants to uphold the honor and tradition of FIFA. uphold the honor and tradition of FIFA. Now, Drew, honor and tradition and FIFA in the same sentence.
Yeah, I can't even hold a straight face when you said that. The only tradition is dishonor. I mean, the time that Sepp Blatter has been running this organization, it's been corruption one bit after another. Nick, the interesting part is the stuff that's been coming out dealing with the South African vote for the World Cup, where South Africa got the win. But if you actually look at the records that have been seized, and more records keep getting seized between the Swiss and the Americans, it shows that Morocco actually won, even though they too bribed. The only reason why Morocco originally won is they bribed the vote. The only reason why South Africa won is they re-bribed the bribe. So it's like you can't win no matter what. But I'm loving that this stuff's coming out. I think Sepp Blatter stepping down and resigning, it's because he knows the writing's on the wall. That man's going to land in some federal pound-me-in-the-tailpipe prison for all the rest of his life, and good riddance for a POS like that. He's made soccer on a world stage such a mockery. I only wish that someone had the stones to stand up and say, I call for a revote on Qatar. But, Nick, I don't think it's going to happen.
Hold on for 1 second. Hold on a second. You said mockery. It's not just
I knew it.
mockery.
It was going to come. Yep.
It's not just a mockery.
Oh, no, it's happening.
It's a travesty. It's a sham. It's a mockery. It's a Travis-sham mockery, I tell you. But
it happened.
And really,
he said it.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, Drew, I'm surprised you didn't go to it out of the gate. What Sepp Blatter pulled off okay, all this came out. First of all, you were dumb enough to actually, run. That's okay. You still won the fifth time. That's when we read Travis-sham mockery standards right there. I can't get past it. You're talking about honor tradition the same way that the mafia has an honor and tradition, all right? The Travis-sham mockery should have been a lead. Of course, I still can't get enough of the fact that, the kid that sucks at soccer, America, was the one that actually opened the lid on all this. I don't completely understand that happened. Unless they were pissed off, were pissed off about the fact that we weren't hosting it, that Qatar, or when did it start getting called Qatar, by the way? That's news to me anyway, but I digress. The fact that Qatar is going to be hosting it when they are at all, aside from the whole 120-degree trying to play soccer thing, it just makes no sense to me either. But we'll go ahead and get thousands of workers killed building all these stadiums leading up to the World Cup. That's cool. Just saying.
But Kyle, the reason why Sepp Blatter ran for a fifth time, it comes from his victory speech. That basically he's like, well, I like you, but I'm the president of you. I run all of this. Basically, it was the most. It made Michael Jordan's Hall of Fame speech seem humble. He lived in such a dream world created by his own corruption that he thought he was untouchable. And then when every one of his dominoes except him got knocked over, oh crap, I'm next. Bull Goldberg's coming after me. So you knew it was only a matter of time before his number was called. So he called it himself to try and save a little face. But as I said before, that man's going to rot somewhere.
But do you know what makes this even? Do you know what makes this even more sick? Do you know what makes this even more sick? Before the next president of FIFA is even elected, it's going to take 6 to 9 months. Let me repeat that, ladies and gentlemen. 6 to 9 months to hold a re-election. Now, because of that, it is my understanding that Sepp Blatter, although he has resigned, will still be sitting on his post until such successor is voted in.
Correct.
Here's another thing. Everybody was like, oh, he got voted back in. Yes, he did. We totally understand he got voted back in. I, choked on my own vomit when that vote came out. But the funny thing is that there were actually 73 nations that said no to Sepp Blatter. Now, in the 4 prior elections, nobody had the audacity, the nerve, the guts, the gumption, whatever you may call, to run against him. Prince Ali, I can't forget, if you want me to pronounce his whole name, it'll be a butchery of the nth degree. But Prince Ali, decided, you know what, I'm going to stay in the race after Luis Figo, one of the great soccer players of all time, and another gentleman, I forgot his name right now. They both dropped out of the election, and Prince Ali stayed in. When it wasn't a majority per se, they had to do a second round. When I heard that, I actually had an inkling of hope. I'm like, wait a minute, this could be possible. And I saw Prince Ali walk up to the stage. I'm like, no, don't do it. Don't concede. Don't give up. Please, for the love of Mary, Jesus, Joseph, and God, do not do this. And he gave up. And the thing that made me sick was that the head of UEFA, which is the European nations, Michel Platini, whatever his friggin' name is, goes up and hugs him. And I kept screaming at the TV, "You voted for Qatar, you moron! How are you even dying? Don't."
So Nick,
Anyway,
the real question is, how much was Prince Ali paid to concede?
To be honest with you, I don't think he was, because let's be honest, the guy's one of the richest men in the world. He's one of the richest men in the world. The guy doesn't need money, even it doesn't need any inkling of a chump change at all. When Blatter then went to his thing, and he kept talking about Oceania, the 11 nations who have maybe a slither of the pie. The only reason why he was continuously, and I counted 6 times during his speech how he thanked Oceania. Sepp Blatter was always for the quote-unquote little guy. He wanted to make it the global game. If there's one good thing, and I am ready to choke on this when I say that, but unfortunately it's the truth. If the one good thing about Sepp Blatter is he truly made it a global game. Little countries that had no business being in the World Cup, qualifying for the World Cup, are now doing so. Getting a game for your country is money in the coffers for your country. And I totally get that. And yes, I, with my 2 pointer fingers, applaud Sepp Blatter for doing so. But I will say this. After hearing about South Africa, after hearing about the money that went into Jack Warner's pocket, after hearing that his own 2 sons pled guilty and were ready to flip on their father at a given notice, hearing how all these people are like indicted and stuff like that, I was like, and then Blatter's resignation and all this good stuff. We have yet to even inch past the first leg of this extremely long journey that will only come to fruition when all the king's men are swept away for good. And when I say all the king's men, I mean every single Blatter follower that is sitting on whatever board, whether it's FIFA, UEFA, Oceania, CONMEBOL, CONCACAF, whatever it may be, until every house is cleansed, a la Game of Thrones, with Drogon blowing fire and burning down houses type of deal. Yes, Game of Thrones reference, deal with it.
Nick, I got a question for you. I got a question for both of you. I got a question for both of you based on that one notion. And I don't mean to cut in, but I really want to find out. Both of you, over or under, how long does this take to clean up? Over or under, the amount of time it took for North Carolina to do their investigation and for the NCAA to drop a hammer?
Over, easily. Drew, we're talking a quarter century of corruption. Okay, let's be clear about that for a minute. A quarter century of worldwide garbage. Sepp Blatter is so despicable that John Oliver had a segment about him called "Bleep That Guy." Okay, give me a break. This is a no-brainer. It's definitely over. And heck, you still got the guy who started the fire running the orphanage for the next few months until they get the other guy in there. Which I understand why Prince Ali doesn't want a job. Nick basically has named him after a character, and I wouldn't want to run the Mickey Mouse organization that FIFA is at this current moment.
Disney joke.
Hey, it's just as good as the Game of Thrones drop. I'm just saying. But, yeah, it's definitely over. I don't know what you got, Nick, but I don't see how it could be under.
In the words of Winston Churchill, in the words of, I'm trying to think of a good general no, I'm going to go with Sherman. War is all hell. And this is going to be a war of epic proportions. This is going to go definitely over the North Carolina crap, but it's going to go about, I would say, 4 or 5 years. And
I think it'll be more than that.
Well, that would be under then.
I think it's going to be 4 or 5 years because Carolina, what do you call it? The Carolina, the Carolina, since we have a perfect segue, Carolina getting the notice of allegations in which it was pretty much academia that was thrown under the bus tenfold, in which Roy Williams, God bless his heart, was only mentioned once. The athletic director, don't remember his name off the top of my head, again, my apologies, was only mentioned once. Players were not mentioned at all. So if you think, Drew, they're going to drop the hammer on North Carolina athletics, you're right, they are, on women's basketball. They're going to drop the hammer on women's basketball. They're not going to drop the ball on men's basketball because it seems to me that the whole thing was weighted towards the women's basketball side and not the men's basketball side. Hell, it was so transparently bad reading these notice of allegations that the football program didn't even get a sniff. And a lot of people remember it was Butch Davis and his crew. Yes, I already know those allegations have taken place. The hammer was dropped, but there was still more residuals coming from that with regards to academics. The football program was not touched. The men's basketball program was hardly touched. Women's basketball program, get out of here, smack. So,
it reminds me of the time.
Your allegations,
reminds me of the time. It's like the NCAA got so mad.
I don't see how the football program can get off. Hell, the Real Sports did a special on them last year about how they were flying kids through classes just to get them to graduate on complete chump classes and majors. I had a show about that myself where I was talking to Brandon Howard about it and just how ridiculous it was in that institution and others. The fact that they got singled out in, lacking a better word, a broadcast on Real Sports. Granted, I know it's on HBO, but hey, so is Game of Thrones, and Nick's heard of it. So, I mean, how do they get off scot-free? I don't get that.
Well, not only that, but half of this spurned because Julius Peppers' transcript accidentally got posted online with his 1.2 GPA. Yeah. I've met rocks, actual real granite rocks that are smarter than a 1.2 GPA. Yeah, better than a 1.2 GPA. Shoot, a 6-year-old can pull that off in a college-level course. But I digress. Now, I don't know if you guys have heard, but sometime ago back in January, they said that 20 other schools were being looked at, and one of them has come out. Texas is now the next one in the crosshairs of academic improprieties. I'm very interested to see where this goes, because you have a coach in Barnes who got essentially let go from Texas, has moved over to Tennessee. I sense there may be a slight vetting problem here. I'm not sure, but
Tennessee, the home of scandal, the home of Bruce Pearl, the home of Johnny Majors, the home of what do you call it? Talk about scandals. It's a scandal. It's an outrage. All that.
Hey, look, I'm going to say this before. Nick can say it. What I'm truly curious about is how many SEC schools are on that list. I'm serious. Like, we joke all the time about the corruption, and it's probably the reason why the SEC is the premier college football conference, except of late. But I really want to see them get hammered for it. As much as I'm a proponent for them on the field. I know they got through less than pure methods. So.
Kyle, but don't you understand, as long as Nick Saban is the head coach at Alabama, Nick Saban, as long as Nick Saban is the head coach of Alabama, as long as Steve Spurrier is the head coach of South Carolina, as long as Mark Richt, God bless his soul, is still the head coach at Georgia, these schools are perfectly, I'm sorry, I forgot about Les Miles and LSU. These schools are perfectly, fine-tuned, upstanding, nothing going on over there. They get all the 5-star recruits.
Nothing to see here.
They get all the 5-star recruits. They get, they get all the top athletes. We totally understand that. We see salaries ranging from like $4 million to like $10 million a year, with gratuities and radio shows and marketing and all that stuff. We really have nothing to worry about with the SEC. We really don't, because the SEC has never gotten into trouble with the NCAA. Never, ever, ever, ever. I mean, when was the last time you heard an SEC school get sanctioned by the NCAA in such a way that, football-wise I'm talking about, in which, that the death penalty was...
Nick, do you want an answer? Do you want to answer this question? I have an answer to this question. Early 2000, Albert Means in Alabama, the scandal was so bad they were actually, the vote for the death penalty almost passed, about as close as Penn State's was. Alabama nearly got shut down in the early 2000s. I'm not making that up.
Ladies and gentlemen,
exactly.
Boy.
But let me just hear that again. Early 2000, the turn of the century. Nothing has happened with the SEC since then. Mark Emmert knows where his cash cow is. Hell, if you really want me to go on a rant, or if you really want Kyle to go on a rant, or you to go on a rant, Mark Emmert would be the perfect guy to go on a rant about, because Mark Emmert is probably the biggest dunderhead that has ever walked on the face of this planet. And yes, people, I'm keeping it PG because this is a family program. One day I will be doing an explicit show, and it will be about Mark Emmert. It will be 30 minutes of F-bombs, MF-bombs, and everything else. But until then, I will
under F-bombs and Scarface.
What do you call it? Yeah, what do you call it? I don't know about Scarface, but it could be damn close to that. But in all seriousness, Mark Emmert has dropped the ball on so many investigations, and when finally he decided to drop the hammer on Penn State, it turned into almost a complete cluster flark with that. And what do you call it? It seems that no matter which way Mark Emmert turns, there's always a big brick wall waiting for him to run into. And he botched Miami. Botched Miami. Yep. I mean, Miami was handed to you on a silver freaking platter, and you blew it. Penn State, we know we're not going to discuss it again ad nauseum. You did the right thing, but you went totally and completely overboard. North Carolina, here's something for you. You're going to have cold feet and only hit the women's basketball program. Okay. 25 other schools, Texas being one of them, the cash cow of college sports, not just football, but of college sports. Ready, willing, guns at the ready, and we'll use pop guns instead of machine guns because that's Mark Emmert's way. There's never going to be what happened back in the early 80s where, the NCAA was the law, and TCU, and Texas A&M, SMU, all the old Southwest Conference schools back in the day, when they were like hammered upon hammered, and that death penalty was actually given to a school because the crimes were so heinous that back then, the crimes were so heinous that there was no choice to be made. This day and age, whether it be FIFA, whether it be NCAA, I will tell you guys this. There will never, ever be a death penalty in college sports ever again. Yes, I am saying it because you two know how I feel about it. If it didn't happen with Penn State, if it didn't happen with Miami, if it's not going to happen with North Carolina because this is another repeater, it's in the rule book, yes, in that 1,000-page piece of junk that the NCAA has as a rule book. This all says you're a repeat offender. You should get whatever punishment is coming to you, not a slap on the wrist. Kyle, please tell me.
Dude, this is simple stuff. And the part that I get that the NCAA is completely missing the ball is with 25 schools on this list, and I think even Drew will back me on this as a college point. I know it's only my second language, but look, with 25 schools on the list, this is the NCAA's opportunity to take some of that power back, to put these contracts that the SEC, for example, has signed and the Big Ten has signed, because I'm sure a couple of schools on the list are Big Ten schools, I'm just saying it. This isn't any offense to anything. This isn't me hating on Ohio State. I actually thought that they were a great champion last year, not for nothing. But I said that for you, Nick, so you can hear me say it all.
Is this recorded?
Yeah, exactly. But all that aside, the NCAA has a great opportunity to actually take control back here. And actually, maybe it doesn't have to be 25 separate death penalties. Nick, I'm with you. If Miami didn't get the death penalty, it's hard to believe that another school will. I'm not going to go as bold as you and give you an upset, but I can understand why you don't think it's going to happen again, and I'm not going to tell you you're wrong. That aside, I don't see how with 25 big-name culprits in your hand, you don't take the opportunity to drive out the paddy wagon and get some law laid down. Again, it doesn't have to be 25 death penalties, but you can make it hurt real bad. I don't know. I don't know where anybody else stands on that, but that's just where I live.
Well, let's look at some history. Let's look at a little bit of history. There's only been 5 instances in history where the NCAA has imposed a death penalty. The most famous being SMU. That's actually the middle of them as far as frequent timeline. First time was Kentucky in the 50s, basketball. Then you have Louisiana Lafayette in the 70s for basketball. SMU's football. Then that's it for Division I. You got to go smaller in Division II and Division III within the last decade. But what we're seeing now is actually a self-imposed death penalty just this year. Western Kentucky University, a Division I school in Conference USA, is imposing a self-imposed death penalty on their men's and women's swimming and diving teams for hazing incidents. So what I'm trying to say is that the school is taking integrity much more seriously than the NCAA, because I guarantee you there are other instances, not just hazing. I think hazing, for the most part, is kind of a minor thing. It impacts a very small group as opposed to academic fraud, which basically involves the entire country because it invalidates the value of a degree, which could be out in California. It could be a bachelor's degree in North Carolina, then a master's degree in Stanford and Harvard, whatever. So you're invalidating one degree, which then damages another, and a job here, and a job there, and a business here, and business here. You get the point. The academic fraud of these schools is so big that the NCAA tried to avoid getting involved to the point where public outcry became so deafening, they now have to be involved. And I think, based on what Nick's saying, they're going to totally try and dodge this one as much as possible. And we all suffer for it.
Agreed.
Well, if there's if there's someone that I think that can also shed a little light, with stuff like this, with stuff like this, it's our second guest happens to be joining us right now, and can maybe give his opinion on what goes on in the sports world. He happens to be one of the top agents in the NFL. He owns his own company called Pro Football Management, and he's an amazing sports mind, to say the least. And in the not-too-distant future, he is going to have his own radio show, and that's going to be something I will be tuning into on a weekly basis when it comes to fruition. Just waiting for that to happen, and very excited about that. He's been a guest on my show before. Ladies and gentlemen, my honor and privilege to give you Mr. Howard Chatsky. Howard, how are you doing tonight?
Very good. Thank you guys for having me, Nick. It's always fun to be on with you and Statboy and Kyle, and it's an exciting time in sports. There's always something going on in the sports world.
Yeah, but before we start with you, Howard, Kyle, want to thank you so much for joining us this evening. It was absolutely awesome to have you back on the air with me and Drew. Why don't you give a plug to the new project that you're working on and where people can find you?
Well,
absolutely.
I'm working on a project with a former client of mine who played for 3 NFL teams. He wrote a book called The Next Level, and the script is almost finished being written. We're talking to some studios about having it made into a movie, which is tentatively titled now The Relentless Journey. You can follow to get details about the movie on Twitter at Relentless Film. And you can also follow me for details on Twitter at Howard Chatsky. So that's one of the projects that I'm working on now and have been working on for the last couple of years that's hopefully about to come to fruition. But I heard you guys before I came on talking about the NCAA. I was in the middle of enjoying a nice evening and then had to hear about one of my favorite institutions.
Favorite institutions. Hold that thought for a second, Howard. Kyle, why don't you let the good people know where they can find you?
Yeah, I'm going to step out of the way and let Howard do his thing. He's going to be far more smarter than I on this topic for sure. I'll be very curious to hear what he has to say. But in the meantime, go ahead and go to YouTube, go to the NGSC Sports web channel, check out the latest in my video series, The Sports Symposium. This is episode 2. Been kind of getting this off the ground. Been an opportunity to explore some topics in the NFL that I just haven't gotten to lately. Maybe have a little fun with it with some video from my assistant, Demosthenes Euclid. Good times all the way around there. Of course, you can find me on Twitter at @BSOTG. And until next time, gentlemen, I had a great time, but class dismissed.
Thanks, Kyle. Have a good one. And that was Kyle Nash, ladies and gentlemen. So, Howard, you heard our little spiel on the NCAA. And which school were you implying that's your quote-unquote favorite school that we were talking about?
Oh, I was talking about the NCAA in general, and obviously that was a sarcastic comment. I think that we're going to see a lot of reform with the NCAA over the next few years. With the Ed O'Bannon suit, every time they go to a court of law, it seems like they end up losing. So I predict within the next 5 years, we will see athletes getting some form of compensation, and I think the entire system is going to get revamped. Right now, they have a great system going where, people talk about the value of a free education, but I don't think they realize the time and effort that goes into being a Division I athlete And a lot of these guys, they're not really learning in the classroom, so they come out of school unprepared to work in the real world. And let's face it, less than 0.5% of all guys that ever played D1 football ever even step on an NFL field. So the vast majority of them are not going to play at the next level. So I feel that the NCAA really needs to do more to actually let these kids know that and prepare them for the real world, so we don't see more guys like Dante Rumpf. It may be a great story, him camping outside and getting a second shot to go to training camp, but let's face it, being homeless and unemployed is, when you really break it down, is not a great story.
Well, I had Dante Rumpf on my show a couple of weeks ago, and he told me about his story and everything like that. And I totally get where you're coming from with regards to being unemployed and homeless and stuff like that. In your opinion, do you think the NCAA should actually have not only just a clearinghouse, but also have a mentor program with regards to athletes who may not make it on at the next level, where they can help find them an actual job, because it's put into their brains from when they're young that it's either football or not. For some people, it's going to be football or nothing, because they were say the high school, the state high school's star and everything like that. They were one of the better guys in college, but in the pros, it's not only an honor, but it's a privilege, and it's not a right. You have to make the team. And people can play in the CFL, they can play in the Arena Football League and stuff like that, but obviously the money will never be the same as it is in the NFL. Do you think that there should be some sort of mentorship program or a counseling program for these athletes to say, hey, you're in your senior year, you may not, here's the hard truth, we can help you get to the real world?
I think you hit the nail on the head right there, Nick, but I think it has to start before their senior year. You have to teach these kids, when you play for the University of Alabama or a big school like that, there are a certain amount of people that are interested in speaking to you just because you're a football player. Now, we do have to be careful because some of these people are boosters, and we have to comply with NCAA rules, which I don't necessarily agree with 100%, but given that, the rules are what the rules are. So right now you have to comply with them. But I do think we need some sort of mentoring program, not only for the guys that are not going to go pro, but also for the guys that are going to go pro. We have a big problem in football now. The vast majority of players choose their agents based on what they're going to pay for. And when you choose an agent just to get a trainer paid for, you may not end up with the best possible guy. You're going to end up with a guy that has deep pockets and the ability to pay for something, but does he have the experience to really represent you? And if you get cut and released like a guy like Dante Rumpf, can your agent help you get to a new team? And these are things that these guys don't really think about. And I've spoken with Dante on Twitter, and he's a very nice young man, but you look at the fact that he's been through 3 or 4 agents and hasn't even been on an NFL roster yet, that shows you there's some sort of problem and some sort of disconnect going on. And so many of these players end up trying to play in the league for 2 or 3 years after college, and when I see a kid 2-3 years out of school and I ask him what he's doing, and he says, well, I'm training to play in the NFL, to me that means you're unemployed. And you can only work out for a certain number of hours a day, so even if you are trying to get back in the league, my guy Jerome Cunningham, who's doing very well now in OTAs with the Giants and getting a lot of attention, he worked for an entire year while he was getting ready back to play in the NFL, went to the regional combine, blew it up there, then got invited to the invite-only combine, which was in Detroit at the time, did very well there, had 14 teams that were interested in signing him, and still had to go to camp on a tryout basis. He got cut, and we were fortunate enough, the Giants had an injury. They brought him in, expecting that he would only be a camp body. He ended up doing so well, they kept him on the practice roster and ended up calling him up to the 53 at the end of last season. But even now, he's one of 3 guys competing for what's probably one spot. So we spend a lot of time talking about what he's going to do after football, and I spend a lot of time educating him on the business of football. And I think this is something that really needs to be done for these kids earlier, like you said, in college. And there are schools that have programs, and the NFLPA has programs, but we have to also do something to make the kids interested, because most of them don't participate in the programs, and obviously from what I'm seeing, the programs are not as effective as they should be. So I do think that something needs to be done. You know, you have schools like Kentucky in basketball that's known as a one-and-done school. Do something for that kid while he's there for a year. Don't just take advantage of his basketball skills. Teach him what he's going to need to know if he's going to play at the next level. Talk to these kids about how to pick an agent. Don't just have the head coach recommend his guy or a guy that he knows. So many of these kids come out of school unprepared for life, whether they're going to play professionally or not. And I think there is a lot more that the schools can and should do for them.
This is something that I've actually talked about for months, back when I used to run my own show, about the investment the schools give to the students as far as like counseling. There's been talks of modifying the one-and-done rule, and in particular in basketball. Do you think that would make a difference, basically make a kid be a little more physically mature before making the jump? Do you think that would actually make a difference or not really?
Well, I'm not in favor of that, because I'm a big believer in that if somebody has the ability to play professionally, they should be allowed to do that when they can. If there was a student that was extremely good with technology and Google offered them a job for 6 figures, nobody would have any problem with them leaving school and taking that job. And I know Michelle Roberts, who heads the NBA Players Union, is very effective, and she's already come out and said there's not going to be any two and done. But I can tell you this, when it comes to collective bargaining, you know, the veterans, let's face it, being honest, they don't really think about the rookies. They think about what they can do to improve their pay and their benefits, and it's often the trade-off is the rookies getting less money or having something like the one-and-done rule being changed to 2 years. So even though Michelle Roberts says it's not going to happen, you know, at what cost would that be in a trade-off to the veteran players? So it may very well happen, and, you know, like you said, it does give a chance for a guy to get more physically and not only physically but off the court mature more. But you have guys like John Wall who were obviously ready to play in the NBA when he came out. So I'm not in favor of that. You know, I believe if a guy wants to take his shot at going pro, as long as he's educated about that and making a smart decision, I'm all in favor of letting them go when they want to.
Okay, fair enough. My opinion is that there's, as you showed, there's some cases that work and some cases that don't, as far as the player thinking they're ready. A good example would be all these junior underclassmen going into the NFL draft, and this year was just absolutely awful for juniors being drafted. In fact, I can speak that a number of them got mid to low round draft grades, still went in, ended up undrafted. From your experience as an agent, having to potentially deal with a junior coming out of college and being undrafted, what kind of advice before they contract with you, before this player gets under contract with you and forgoes their eligibility? What kind of advice can you give them as far as whether is this the right move or not?
Well, I think that's where agents can help a lot. And college coaches, I do also represent coaches, but coaches have a self-interest in keeping good players in school. Now, there are some guys like Calipari in basketball, they tell the kid right out, hey, if you're ready, I'm going to tell you you're ready, and that's what they sell to these kids in recruiting, and that's why they're able to get so many one-and-done guys at Kentucky. But when it comes to football, let me put a caveat on what I said. I agree with you 100%. There are kids declaring for the draft that have no business leaving school early. They don't graduate. They end up being mid-round picks. Some of them don't make the teams. They end up, like you said, not knowing anything else other than football. So it's hard for them to even think about getting a job, and most of them have no idea what they want to do. So, I've been involved with several juniors that came out early. I remember Scott Milanovich, who's now a head coach up in Canada. He was thinking about coming out early from Maryland. He would have been drafted in the third round, ended up going back to school because some promises were made to him about how many reps he would get. He didn't get those reps, so when he played, he wasn't ready. So that was actually a case of a kid going back to school, and he ended up going much lower in the draft than he would have. So, it's a very difficult decision to make. Scott Mitchell, who I represented a while back, who was actually on The Biggest Loser last season, Scott was told by everybody in the NFL that he was going to be a first-round pick. He ended up not being a first-round pick, but it ended up working out well for him because unlike most of the quarterbacks that come out now, he didn't have to play early. He got a chance to sit and learn behind Dan Marino. Ultimately, he had, what could be called a decent NFL career, but Marino got hurt. He ended up playing those last 8 games in Miami and signed the NFL's first big free agent contract, which now seems like very small money, but at the time, getting an $8 million signing bonus was unheard of. But he had, a couple teams bidding against each other. So, it's a situation where I can remember Ray Lewis when he was thinking about coming out. He was told by his coaches that he should go back to school. Now, 13 Pro Bowls later and a Hall of Fame career, I think we can say that Ray Lewis made the right decision to leave Miami when he did. So, there are players that should come out and there are players that shouldn't. And I think one of the things that an agent can do, a good agent at least, can talk to NFL people and get their opinion on where the player is going to go. Now, obviously, there are college coaches that also have the ability to do that, but in all honesty, I think an agent can probably be just as good, if not better, than a college coach at providing that advice to a player. And I think that's one thing where, let's be above board about it. We don't have to hide it. We don't have to make it a secret. It's not illegal for agents to talk to players while they're in school. In my opinion, college coaches should have good agents talk to their players that are juniors, but it has to be guys that are going to give them the right advice, not guys that are just trying to sign the player and looking out for themselves. Because, I could never tell a kid who I thought was going to be a low-round pick just because I thought he was going to sign him that he should leave school, because I don't think that's the right advice. Now, if there's a family situation or something like that, Scott Mitchell was willing to roll the dice because he had been sacked, I think it was 56 times his junior year, and they were losing guys off that offensive line, and he was also either married or close to getting married, so he had a family to support, and had he gone back to Utah, having been sacked that many times his junior year, he might have been killed his senior year. So, he really didn't have a choice but to leave. So, there are guys that should leave, and there are guys that get bad advice from people. They have people around them that tell them that are great players, that they're going to go high in the draft, and they don't do the proper research. And like you said, it was a debacle what happened this year with the juniors that declared for the draft. And I think with better advice, we wouldn't see something like that, and we shouldn't see something like that.
So do you think the draft advisory board is not doing their job, or is it more that they're getting the grades and they're just ignoring them and continuing?
I'm not sure that the draft advisory board really gives accurate information to these kids about where they're going to go in the draft. It's very early in the process. It's before they have a chance to work out for individual teams. It's before the combine. And I believe, why shouldn't juniors be able to play in the same all-star games that seniors are? I believe juniors should have the opportunity to also play in those games and show what they can do. And, unlike the NBA, I am in favor of players in football having to stay longer because physically it's a different sport. And I just don't think a 17 or 18-year-old kid can be ready physically for the NFL.
Now, you talked about your book and your screen and the possible screenplay that's coming out. What was the to talk about what you stated earlier? What was the mindset going into writing the book and the screenplay?
Well, Vernon Turner was a guy who was an absolute long shot to play in the NFL, and as I've told him, when he came to us for representation, I was not really looking to work with him. At the time, it was my first year in the business. I had signed my first big client, Andre Collins, who was expected to go high in the draft and ended up getting picked in the second round by the Washington Redskins, and they had no first-round pick that year, so he was their first pick, and that's really where my attention and efforts were focused. And we really took Vernon on as a favor, but you talk about a kid who literally killed himself to try to play in the NFL. Unbeknownst to me at the time, he had to make the NFL, or his family, his brothers and sisters, would have had to go into foster care. So Vernon, early on in his career, if you go and search on YouTube, you'll find an interview that I believe he did in 1994 where he said, my story is unbelievable, and someday I'm going to write a book about it. And the book is not really a football story, although football is obviously the subcontext for it. It's about a kid who had to overcome obstacles his entire life to get where he did. And now one thing I'm even more proud of than his NFL career, which lasted maybe 6 or 7 seasons, he's now, you take a kid who grew up in Bedford-Stuyvesant, which if you know anything about New York, is one of the worst ghettos there is. Nobody thought this kid would ever turn into anything in his life. He's now an executive in Houston working in the oil industry and makes a very good salary and is able to support himself. And that's what the NFL should really be about. The majority of players don't even make it to free agency, but you can get a good head start and put some money away. And that's why one thing I preach to my players is very early in your career, you need to think about what you're going to do after football. And, for example, Jerome Cunningham is interested in being a trainer. The NFLPA has a free program. He's already certified as a CrossFit trainer, and here's a kid going into his second NFL season. So, that's the type of guys I like to work with that are really looking for advice. And that was really the whole idea behind the book, not only to tell Vernon's story, but to show these kids how hard it is to make it not only in the NFL, but in life. So it's really a tremendous story, and we do have several studios that are interested in reading the script, and I'm really hoping that somebody makes it into a movie because I think it's a great story that people would really be interested in learning more about. And I encourage everyone to watch, follow at Relentless Film and look at the videos that we have posted online, because they are really very compelling. So I think it's a fantastic story, and hopefully one day we will see it on the big screen.
That would be totally awesome to see that type of story on the big screen. Howard, it was an honor, as always, to have you on my show tonight. Why don't you let the good people know exactly where they can find you again, give them a reminder on Twitter, and also just plug Pro Football Management.
Well, like I said, Nick, it's always a pleasure being on your show. I thank you guys for having me on. Pro Football Management, is a company that I founded. I also represent coaches for a firm, Coaches, Inc., but I've been representing football players for almost 30 years now, so I'm one of the most experienced agents in the business. You can find me on Twitter at Howard Shatsky, SHATSKY, and I love interacting with fans, so anybody that has questions about football, sports in general, right now we have the NBA Finals going on. It's a great series between one team that's never won a championship and one team that hasn't won one since, most of your listeners weren't even born. So there's always something really interesting going on in sports, and I'm always up for conversation with the fans who want to hit me up on Twitter. So, like I said, you can find me at Howard Shatsky, and anyone who wants to have a conversation, feel free to follow me and tweet at me, and I will always answer you and get back to you.
Thank you so much, Howard. Greatly appreciate it, as always, and definitely going to have you on down the road when we would love to have you again, that's for sure. I mean, especially and I pretty much have no doubt. I know how hard a worker you are and everything like that with your clients and everything, especially with what you did with Vernon Turner. And I would not be surprised if we were to see his story on the big screen. I think that's something that would behoove Hollywood or whomever to put that story in the eyes of those that need to understand what perseverance really means.
Well, like I said, Nick, it's always a pleasure to be on your show, and I look forward to coming on anytime you guys would like to have me. And like
Awesome.
you said, hopefully when I get my own show going, maybe you can return the favor and be a guest on my show.
All it takes is one phone call, and I'm there. That's a guarantee.
Well,
Same
like
here.
I said, it was great to be on, and I look forward to talking with you guys again soon.
Awesome. Thank you, Howard. Have a good night.
You too.
That was Agent Howard Shatsky. Drew, he really brought up some majorly good points. And yes, on your old show, the OT with Andrew G., yes, a shameless plug, you pretty much harped about it early and often. And, it is something that you would think the NCAA or the NFL, NBA, MLB, whoever it may be, you would think someone would pick up on this. They never do.
Well, it's because to them it doesn't matter. People are either going to get their money, get the prestige. It depends on what angle you're coming from. If it's a school, you've got the wins and the prestige from them already, and you'd love to keep them, but you're not going to try real hard because you've got the next great thing coming in out of high school already. So the revolving door is going on. From the agent, and I'm not putting Howard in this because he comes off as a man of integrity, but there are a lot, as he alluded to, there are plenty that do not. It's $1. To the team, it's wins and $1. So, look at a guy like Johnny Manziel, drafted by Cleveland, which, by the way, I hated that pick from day one. The guy was picked as a PR move partially to sell jerseys. He sold the most jerseys last season. There's a reason why A team like Cleveland drafted. They needed the shot in the arm from a PR standpoint. That's where they got their coin. They didn't get anything on the field from, but that's okay. They got the money from all those jersey sales. I don't think they expected to be such a bust, but you get the point. Everyone's got an agenda, one way or the other, and the schools aren't investing extra to teach some of these players life skills. A lot of these guys come from bad neighborhoods where they never learn how to balance a checkbook, or what does it mean when I get direct deposit? What is that? There are some really simple life skills here that they never learn because of where they come from. That falls partially on the school. They need to teach life skills. By the time you go to the pros, you should already have your life skills. The team's job is not to hold your hand. That's what schools have to. If you're willing to take a player for even a one and done, you have to invest in this kid's well-being. I don't just buy them, use them, throw them away. It's something that grinds my gears still. And it's been a year since I harped about it once before, so it still gets me going now.
Well, honestly, I'm really not surprised, because it's something that needs to be taken up with very, very soon, or else it's just going to get that much worse. We're going into the second hour here, ladies and gentlemen, right live on the Mad Scientist Sports Lab. I am the Mad Scientist of Sports, Nick Piccarelli, along with my able-bodied assistant, Stat Boy himself, Andrew Glukov. And joining us now is one of the preeminent fantasy football and NFL minds in the United States today, possibly in the world. He has his own show on Sirius XM Radio. He is known as the Football Diehard. He is a guy that I hold on a very extremely high pedestal, because whenever you need advice, he is one of the go-to guys with regards to everything and anything football. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I welcome into the lab my next test subject, Mr. Bob Harris. Bob, how you doing tonight?
I came with my electrodes already hooked up, so have at me.
Hardcore.
Awesome. We know you just had your own show that you just got done on Sirius XM, so you're probably going to be a little bit talked out when it comes to football. But then again, it is football.
That's impossible. It's impossible.
Exactly. It's 24/7, 365 deal over here. So first thing I wanted to talk to you about, I'm going to go to the Minnesota Vikings and the Adrian Peterson saga, which has finally come to a merciful end.
Yes.
We all know that Ben Dogra, the agent for Adrian Peterson, pretty much wanted to napalm the Vikings to the point that they want to the point of trading his client. Peterson.
Well, let's get it right. I mean, Ben Dogra's client wanted Ben Dogra to napalm the Vikings so they would trade his client, right? I mean, this is not like Ben Dogra made this decision. And then when it didn't work out, Adrian Peterson came out and manned up and said, oh, well, he was doing his job. And he was doing his job. And Peterson did want out. But now that he's not out, I guess, when you're sitting there and you're looking at I think Mike Zimmer was the catalyst for this, right, guys? When Mike Zimmer came out and said, point blank, he plays for us or he does not play. I think, Mike Zimmer, if you aren't as familiar with him, go ahead and Google him in Hard Knocks and you will have a very enjoyable experience. He swears only slightly more than me, which means intersyllabic swearing is like a thing for him. And he's just a hard, old-school guy. And I think that's what's keeping Peterson in Minnesota. His respect for that kind of coaching and that kind of approach. That's all players want. Players just want to know where they stand. That's it. And I think you know where you stand with Mike Zimmer.
Well, I know. I totally get the fact that Peterson pretty much gave Ben Dogra his marching orders for everything. For everything. But there is a tactful way to do it, and then there's the napalm way to do it. The way that Ben Dogra went about doing it, to me, is that he went a little bit above and beyond exactly what Adrian Peterson was looking for. I mean, you don't go and push someone from the Minnesota Vikings front office in front of everybody and almost get into a Pier 6 brawl. You don't go on every single airwave and air every last grievance to the point that, oh, my client once had hangnail, and the Vikings said, well, suck it up, it's just hangnail or something like that. You know, there's a tactful way to go about doing it. If there's a guy, if he should have went to the school of Bus Cook with Brett Favre and how that was, and how that was handled. In which,
I don't disagree with you. I mean, both guys have clients that are hard-headed, right, and that want their way. And to whatever degree they demand that behind the scenes, we don't really know. And, how much pressure that puts on the agent to act the way he acts. I mean, Ben Dogra, his reputation in general, he's a hard-nosed, hardball guy, so his approach didn't surprise me, but it comes from the player. I mean, we can sit here and we can kick Dogra around all we want, but it comes from the player. Player wanted out. Dogra's job was to get him out. He did what he could. I don't disagree with you. He could have been more tactful. He could have handled it in a different way, but obviously I think his approach is a reflection of how bad his client wanted out. And look, that's what we heard from everybody. I mean, from Peterson himself saying, look, I don't trust the Vikings. There's one guy in particular in the front office he didn't trust. He wanted out really bad. He wanted a fresh start. We heard it over and over. Well, now he gets his fresh start, and I'm happy to see him back in Minnesota where he will flourish in a Norv Turner offense, well-rested with a man-sized chip on his shoulder. I think that's going to be a potent weapon for them. I think they all come out ahead.
Well, here's the funny thing. It was amazing that it was a couple of years ago he blew out his knee. He came back and almost broke Eric Dickerson's single-season record. Now, last year he was suspended, technically suspended for the season, but he was on the exempt list. And now, you look at him coming back now. I'm starting to. Full disclosure, I am a Minnesota Viking fan, and I'm extremely ecstatic that he's staying. I'm almost wanted to say to myself, if he doesn't get suspended for a severe period amount of time, could we see that happen again, in which he would run for like 2,098 yards and almost 20 touchdowns and stuff like that? What do you think?
I am no longer in the business of saying Adrian Peterson can't do anything Adrian Peterson says he can. That's not a good business to be in because he demonstrated that, as you said, coming off the ACL. I'm all in. I mean, from a fantasy perspective, he's my first pick overall. If I get that shot at him, I'm taking him. I'll go on that chance. I think there's risk associated with everyone at the top of your draft, and you swing for the fence. I think he's that guy. I mean, the well-rested, obviously has been working out if you listen to what everyone's been saying. I will tell you, though, had Paul Charchian on my show tonight from KFan. He's not as sold on him, and I think some of his arguments are valid. And some are less valid. But, I mean, amongst the valid arguments is, look, Teddy Bridgewater is an emerging talent. They're going to throw the ball more. They brought in Mike Wallace, Kyle Rudolph healthy. I think you can make the argument that yes, they can be a more diverse offense than they were in the past. That said, if you have Adrian Peterson, I think if you look at Norv Turner's history with running backs, I mean, he turned Lamont Jordan into a 1,000-yard, 60-catch running back who had never done anything before and never did anything after. I mean, that's, Norv Turner stock and trade, starting with Emmitt Smith. I mean, you can run through the list of running backs who have had great success under him. I don't see any difference unless you just look, running backs hit the cliff, right? They fall off. If that's the case with Peterson, I'm going to look stupid, and the Vikings are going to be bummed out. I just don't think we've seen it yet.
Now, going to move over to Dallas, and rumor has it now that Dez Bryant is going to sit out the first game of the NFL season because of the way his contract talks are going. And in Denver, we hear Demaryius Thomas is actually saying the same thing, possibly going a little bit further because of his contract talks or lack thereof. The perfect parallel to this is that they are both franchise players. Now,
right.
One would think that, signing for 1 year and being the top paid, wide receiver in the league would be worth the risk of doing business in the NFL and have another career year in which, if my understanding is correct, you don't have to be you can't be franchised. You can't be franchised again if the franchise tag had been used a certain period of time in the past. And looking at both Dallas and Denver, they have used the franchise tag, often. And, why do you think that they would threaten to sit out a game in which the teams are like, okay, you want to sit out a game, you're losing money, we'll save money, and we'll get the guys that want to play on the field?
Because they're not good at public negotiations. It's ridiculous. It's not going to happen. They each have two options. They can play for $12.8 million this year, or they cannot play and they can lose about $800,000 a week. Neither of them is going to do that. They can't better their cause. Once they haven't signed by July 15th, if they don't have a long-term deal in place by July 15th, they are playing for $12.85 million, or they're not playing. And if they do have an option, they can sit out until the 10th week of the season and then come back and still accrue their free agency, come back again next year, and they can be franchised again next year, but that gets them a 20% raise over what they're making this year. So this whole notion that the franchise tag is like the brown helmet of hell that it's kind of ridiculous. What players want is long-term deals. They want long-term security. That's the only drawback. It's not like they're losing out on anything. They just want that upfront money. And I think for receivers, the earlier they get it in their career, the more likely they are to get that second big contract. And that's what they're all looking at. They want to get the first one fast, like Randall Cobb did, right? You want that first contract, the big one, and then if you get it early enough in your career, hell, you get another one of those. And that's what they're all after. That's what these guys want. The notion that either of them will miss any games is more than a stretch. It's almost ridiculous. Public negotiations are always great fun and always more strident than they need to be, and in this case, both cases they are.
Now, when you talk about negotiations, we've seen negotiations, blow up to the point that everybody's angry for each other. And then when a contract is signed, it's always like, oh, I've always wanted to play here. Things were said that shouldn't have been said and everything like that. When you talk about Dez Bryant, especially with Dez Bryant, we do know how sensitive he is, when someone says anything about him. And, do you think that Jerry Jones is playing the mind game with him right now, going, look, son, you're worth a lot of money to me, but, you're not worth that much. Considering the fact that you threw $50 million guaranteed at Tony Romo, I don't understand how you can think that. But, this is one of your franchise players right now on offense. What do you think that this impasse will come to a quick end, or do you see this going until July 15th?
Look, there's a reason there are deadlines, because nothing gets done until they happen, right? That's why they're there. If something's going to happen, it will not happen until the deadline, I don't think. I mean, I do know that in Dallas, the two sides have not talked since Bryant switched agents. He just switched to Tom Condon. So there's been zero discussions with the agent. So it's going to take some time to get something done either way once they start talking. And again, if they get it done, it'll come at the deadline, because that's what deadlines do. They make things happen. I don't know that it will happen. I think some of these, some of this is both the teams and the players have a bit of an interest in waiting to see. I mean, there's other guys coming up too, Julio Jones, A.J. Green. I mean, do you really want to be the first guy to sign a long-term deal? Because if you wait until those guys sign, you're going to get more than them if you can wait until after. I think that's one of the things that kind of baffles me about being upset that you're not getting the long-term deal yet. Maybe you wait a little bit and you see what Julio Jones is getting, and you get $1 more than Julio Jones or $2 more than A.J. Green. But whatever the case, it will get done in its own time. The way things are set up now, I don't see how anyone is going to, not be playing for the $800,000+ a week that the franchise tag gives them. They want that big bonus. They want that long-term deal. That's how a player makes his money. Nothing is guaranteed beyond that, that bonus money, that guaranteed cash, and that's what they're looking for, and that's what the big deal gives them.
So the next question I have.
Oh, Nick, you got something?
Oh, go ahead, Drew.
I got a question about the young running backs. We got, since pretty much Trent Richardson, the NFL's been shying away against first-round running backs. We just had a couple drafted this year. How much real, not perceived pressure, but real pressure are on these two guys to perform, to basically reinvigorate the feelings towards a high-round running back?
I don't know. In Gurley's case, Todd Gurley's case, I think with the Rams, I don't think the expectations are great because he's coming off the ACL, and nobody's really sure if he'll, be ready to go week one. Although, based on what I'm hearing, I think he will be. Whether the Rams push him into that or not, we'll see. That's a pretty, big investment. But we all know how Jeff Fisher likes to roll if he gets a chance. I mean, ask Eddie George. He will run him back into the dirt, and I suspect at some point that's the plan. In Melvin Gordon's case, I think, San Diego, you're looking at the team that ranked 30th in the league in rushing last year. They had 6 rushing touchdowns. 3 of those left town when Ryan Matthews did. They need somebody to come right in and get the job done. And I think, when I look at Gordon, I see a Wisconsin running back. Oh, I've seen this before. I saw it when it was Monty Ball and he came up short. I saw it when it was Ron Dane and he came up short. All these guys ran behind these big road grader lines in Wisconsin and had great success and not as much as pros. I don't think Gordon is your father's Wisconsin running back. I think he's a little different guy. I think he has a little more, and he can get a little something done in San Diego. Opportunity is certainly there. He needs to cash in.
So what? Sticking with the AFC West, you talked about San Diego. Makes me think of a team that also had similar struggles.
Drew, you there?
I think we lost Drew.
I think we just did lost Drew too. Anyway, what do you call? With regards to, let me pick up where he left off on the rookie running backs. Now, with Melvin Gordon in San Diego, I actually thought Melvin Gordon should have been the top running back pick in the draft. When St. Louis took Gurley, I was like, okay, I can understand that. We're talking about a guy who could be one of the most explosive players when healthy. Obviously, as you said, with the ACL, you don't know what you're going to get from him this year. To look at what Melvin Gordon did at Wisconsin and how he plays the game, San Diego, to me, was one of the perfect landing spots for him, especially when you have a veteran quarterback in Philip Rivers, tight end, in Antonio Gates, a really good wideout in Keenan Allen. I mean, the pieces are there. So I was wondering if you think Gordon is more set up to succeed rather than Gurley.
Yeah, I totally do. I mean, 2 things. It's a more. You mentioned the quarterback. I think that's a big deal. I think in Keenan Allen, you do have a good guy down the field. I think Malcolm Floyd's underrated. I think Stevie Johnson will rebound even. Playing with a guy like Philip Rivers in an offense where he's not, in San Francisco where they just, beyond the top receivers, there's nothing going on. But I do think he's in a better position. One problem for Gurley, aside from the knee, is St. Louis's offensive line was horrible last year. Now they reloaded there, and they're trying to get better, and we'll see if they do or not. I think Gordon over time will be, if you watch what he did in college, he looks like he could be as good as anybody, but we've seen that before, said Trent Richardson. So, nothing is guaranteed for running backs. I mean, guys will come out of nowhere at that position. I will say in San Diego, I think Danny Woodhead will continue to play a role. He's a good receiver. He'll be back to full health. He has a nice nose for the end zone, too. Don't discount him as a red zone weapon. But I do think Gordon is the best guy set up for success of the incoming, especially the first-round guys. I think beyond that, some of them are, T.J. Yeldon's in a great situation. I think in Jacksonville they're going to give him the load. He's going to be the guy. There's nobody else there really that they're going to count on to carry. I would say he's a 300-touch guy this year. And their offensive line is going to be better this year in Jacksonville. So don't overlook him. Some concerns about Tevin Coleman. I'm not sure how good he fits that zone blocking scheme. Devontae Freeman's there. The early round backs, Gordon is definitely in the best spot, in the best position, but don't discount Yeldon.
Now, with regards to the rookie quarterbacks, we know Winston was taken number 1 overall by Tampa Bay. We know Mariota was taken number 3 by the Tennessee Titans. Between those two quarterbacks, which one do you think will be set up to have a better rookie season? Now, I'm not saying that either of them are going to light it up right off the bat. We all know rookie, unless you're like that, you're really, really special. Rookie quarterbacks in the NFL struggle mightily. Even the great Peyton Manning struggled really bad his first season in the.
He did throw him a lot of interceptions.
Yes, he did. So, where do you think that these two would go in a fantasy draft? And if they do go, do you expect modest numbers from both of them?
I think Winston is a guy that interests me. Not so much for him, but for the guys that are around him, right? I mean, like you said, nobody's going to be, knocking themselves out to draft either guy as their fantasy quarterback in redraft leagues. But I think Winston, if you play the daily game or if you're in dynasty leagues, both of them are going to go in dynasty drafts. There's no doubt about it. But I think as the season unfolds, you look at the weapons around him, you look at the kind of offense Dirk Cutter's going to run, you look at the guys like Mike Evans, 6'5", you look at Vincent Jackson, 6'5", you look at Austin Seferian-Jenkins, 6'5". These big, wide, body guys that can go up and beat a guy out for the ball. They play into Winston's strength, the big arm. So I do think he has a chance not only to put up some decent numbers himself, but to keep the guys that we really want as fantasy owners, the Mike Evans, scored a lot of touchdowns last year. Maybe we'll struggle in that regard this year. I mean, it's going to be hard to repeat that. But I think all those guys make out okay with Winston there. You look at all the complaints about Winston, none of them are on the field. They're all off the field. And he seems to be cleaning that up, or he has cleaned that up to the degree where the Buccaneers certainly aren't worried about it. So I think he has a chance to be a decent quarterback, and maybe as the season goes on, he turns into a guy that you can plug in daily games as a value play, maybe a cheaper guy who on weeks when you need somebody. In fantasy anymore, streaming quarterbacks, drafting quarterbacks late, that's become all the rage, and I'm kind of on board that. So I think as we get into the season, we'll see that Winston is a little more interesting to me. I think the problem for Mariota is coming into guy has not taken a lot of snaps under center. He's playing for a coach in Ken Whisenhunt, who the next quarterback he develops at the pro level will be the first he ever develops at the pro level. Ken Whisenhunt, very good at coaching, very good quarterbacks. Not so good at developing quarterbacks. So that's my issue with Mariota.
Now, going to Oakland and knowing that they drafted Amari Cooper at number 3, the news coming out of Oakland is not only do they want Amari Cooper to be their number 1 receiver, but they also want him to return punts. If I were an Oakland Raider fan right now, I would be deathly afraid of that happening. The reason why is because the injury aspect goes up tenfold, knowing that, Cooper is going to be your star, pretty much your star player, your crutch for Carr, but having him return punts, all it takes is one bad cut, one bad hit to the knee, a high shot, whatever it may be. Do you believe that Oakland should even think about, sending him out there for punt returns, or do you think it's something that really we shouldn't be worrying about?
Antonio Brown tells me not to worry about it. I mean, look, if he's the best guy on the team and he's the best guy they have returning punts, he's the most dangerous threat, Oakland needs to get something done. I mean, would I be eager to risk my top playmaker in that role? No, but other teams do it, and guys have fared pretty well. Antonio Brown is the example that leaps right to mind. And to me, the best receiver in the NFL is Antonio Brown, who also returns punts. So it doesn't scare me. I mean, again, I probably wouldn't do it. I'm old and easily frightened, so it would probably put me off. But I don't think it's a big deal. I think when you're the Oakland Raiders, you need to win some damn games, and if he helps you do that as a punt returner, you do it.
Well, one last question, and I'll give it to my partner, Drew, who's back in the lab. So, Drew, one last question.
Hi, Drew.
For
I'm back. Nick, you said you had one more?
Go ahead.
Oh, I thought you said one more. So what I was saying before the internet decided to rudely interrupt me.
Hate the internet.
I wanted to talk about, God bless the internet and God curse the internet.
Both.
Bit of both. So in the AFC West, Kansas City, historically bad passing results last year. You lose Dwayne Bowe. Where does this team go from here? Obviously,
you say lose Dwayne Bowe like it's a bad thing. Good Lord, that might be the best thing that ever happened to him.
Well, it may be good for them.
they got to drive the ball down the field, and they're going to work with that on Alex Smith. We're talking about a team that did not throw a touchdown pass to a wide receiver last year. But do they really need to? I think, you think back to the game against Oakland, Alex Smith threw 5 touchdowns. Those 5 touchdown passes, one of them I think was like a 70, 80-yard touchdown. They traveled a grand total of 13 yards through the air. He's got playmakers, guys like Jamal Charles, guys like Travis Kelce. Now he'll have Jeremy Maclin. We'll see what Jeremy Maclin can do. But I don't know that you need – certainly it will help you. In the end, the more productions you're getting from all your skill players, the better off you are. I just don't know that Dwayne Bowe was the guy who was going to get any of that production anyway. So I think his best days are behind him. We'll see what Maclin does. You look at his pass with Andy Reid, he averaged, 50, 60 passes a year in Philadelphia under Reid, but that was with Deshaun Jackson. So there's not a lot of other game in town there. Chris Conley, the rookie, comes in. He's a great workout warrior, was pretty impressive at the combine, but comes from a place where receivers notoriously need a little time as pros to understand the game, and some of them never do. So, I'm not 100% sold on the guys down the field, but I'm 200% sold on Jamal Charles and Travis Kelce.
All right, I got one more question, and we talked about the Raiders a little bit before, but I got to go a little fanboy on this. I went to UCF. What's your take on the potential Latavius Murray?
I love Murray. I talked to him at the Super Bowl. He's a really nice guy. I just think he's the kind of explosive threat. I mean, we saw it last year, just hints of it, but I think we saw enough of it to believe that that's what he is. We're hearing more of that, more of the same from mini camps. I think Jack Del Rio gives him a chance to be that guy. I mean, look, we know what Trent Richardson can do, 3 yards at a time. We know what Latavius Murray can do. Sometimes he'll break one off for 80. I think, that's the Raiders' desperate need is for guys who can make plays. That's why Amari Cooper's there. You look at last year, Derek Carr, his average completion was less than 6 yards per. They need to get the ball down the field. I believe they understand that Latavius Murray is the guy that does that for them with the ball on the ground. So look for a lot of him. And I think if he can stay healthy, he could be a very explosive threat, maybe a guy that people will overlook in their fantasy draft that they should not.
I know I won't. That's a little fanboy right there. We were really enjoying watching him down here in Florida before his injuries knocked him out. I only got one more, and it's only because I'm originally from Cleveland.
Oh no.
Yeah, I hated it from day one, but I'm stuck with it. Johnny Manziel, is he ever going to turn the corner? I actually personally like Connor Shaw better. Because he's a grittier quarterback, in my opinion. But is he ever going to turn the corner, or cut the chains loose, lost cause?
No, he's not ever going to turn the corner. I mean, and all the off-field aside, when you look at what he did on the field, I think the glaring thing to me was, his game was being quicker, faster, more athletic than all the other guys on the field. At the pro level, he is not that. He just isn't. It's that simple. They'll use Josh McCown as a bridge until they find somebody who is.
Fair enough. Nick, that is all from me after the internet took a massive dump on me.
Yeah, well, that seems to happen in the lab quite often lately with regards to the interwebs being taken out by some gremlins, but c'est la vie. Bob, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Why don't you let the good people know where they can find you on social media, and please plug your show.
I'm on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio every Saturday night in the off season, 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern. We'll be bumping that up and doing Thursdays and Saturdays as we get into July. Then once the season starts, I'll be on every single day of the week except Saturday, including the 3 hours up to your kickoff every Sunday. Otherwise, I'm on footballdiehards.com, and you can find me on the Twitters at footballdieHard.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bob, and greatly appreciated you coming on, especially after doing 3 hours earlier tonight. Hope to have you back on when time arises, but knowing your busy schedule, oh boy, it's going to be a little rough, but you, awesome as always, and looking forward to listening to you on Saturday nights on SiriusXM Fantasy.
Thanks for having me on. I look forward to doing it again. Bye, guys.
All right. And that was Bob Harris, the football diehard from SiriusXM Radio. We're talking some football with us. Oh, Drew. I swear. Can there be 1 week in which the internet doesn't screw with you?
Seriously. Well, now I'm back on the regular hookup as opposed to the super emergency fallback option. Hence the drop and reconnect just about 30 seconds ago that no one heard about until I unfortunately threw myself under the bus. But yeah, I blame technology. Technology brings us this wonderful show, and technology continues to screw with my emotions.
Well, anyway, just to let you know that a lot of people understand that they're listening to this show right now live, right here on Blog Talk Radio, and sometimes we would go on a harpy about Blog Talk Radio, but for the first time in a long time, can't say anything bad about them. Wow, shocker! I can't believe I said that.
It's actually kind of surprising this time around.
I know. We got our last guest this evening, ladies and gentlemen, and as always, we're coming to the end of hockey season, and I know this guy is in his boo-hoo stages right now. However, we have witnessed another epic Game 5 in which, once again, the unbeatable Chicago Blackhawks, when it comes to Game 5, they just pull it out time, and they took Game 5 to take a 3-2 lead. Antoine Vermette, again, it just seems the playoffs. It's got to be the playoffs with Vermette. I'm just thoroughly convinced with it. So who better to talk about staying in the Stanley Cup Finals? None other than our good friend from Project Roto, Mr. Chris Russell. Chris, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing glorious, Nick. Simply glorious. There is no boo-hoo.
There is no boo-hoo. Especially when it comes to hockey. But once again, Chicago, Game 5 seems to be very synonymous. There were a lot of people, that said that, this is a game that Tampa Bay had to have, especially at home. Chicago went in, played their game, and sure enough, took Game 5 away from Tampa Bay. And a lot of people, myself included, said Blackhawks in 6. Is it a foregone conclusion now, or is there still a little bit left in the system for Tampa Bay?
I mean, look, Tampa Bay is always going to have something left. Even tonight they had 32 shots on goal, but you just cannot overcome the mistakes that Tampa Bay has made. They cannot keep doing this, and yet it was stressed from pretty much after Wednesday night, guys, until the opening face-off tonight. And yet, the same exact things happened, and even worse. 8 of the 9 first face-offs were won by Chicago. They were able to, for once, generate some in-zone time. They get the goal off what was just an enormous gaffe, miscommunication by Victor Hedman and Ben Bishop, who should have gotten the assist on the goal, to be honest. I mean, I know the NHL is how it is, but that was bad. You cannot have that in the playoffs. The last time I think I've seen something like that was maybe Martin Brodeur in the 2003 Cup Finals against Anaheim, where basically different situation but same kind of result, where you have communication with your defenseman. Somebody should have been paying attention, and that unfortunately happened. I mean, the sad part in all of this is Ben Bishop played really well tonight, and unfortunately for them, Chicago had just enough in the tank. They get a clutch effort from not just Antoine Vermette, but you got to look at that whole line, guys. Chris Versteeg and Teuvo Teravainen were a nice trio tonight. They generate a lot. They played a lot of downhill hockey in Tampa zone, and it was those bottom two lines tonight. You didn't hear too much really from Taves and Kane tonight. You didn't hear too much from the Brandon Saad line, but from the bottom six, you heard quite a bit, and that's important for Chicago when they can generate chances, when they can play in your zone. They don't care how often they're out hit or if they're a little out physical, if you will, or even almost downright bullied like what Anaheim tried to do to them. It doesn't work, and you see the result.
Now, you mentioned the mistakes that Tampa Bay has made, and John Cooper in his post-game press conference continuously is trying to pound into the media that this is not an inexperienced Tampa Bay Lightning playoff team. When you make the same mistakes over and over and over again, does that not show you how inexperienced you are, especially when you're on such a big stage like the Stanley Cup Finals?
Yeah, I mean, you have to look at this, guys. Anybody listening out there, Tampa's average age is a hair over 25. Now, the funny thing in all this is Chicago's not that old either. Their average age is a little bit over 27 and a half. That's not that bad. But, yeah, Tampa, it's a difference. When a lot of your core players are very young, and tonight, yeah, it did hurt that they lost Nikita Kucherov early, and also, to be honest, everybody knows Tyler Johnson's wrist is hurt in some way. So basically, if you look at it, that's 2/3 of the triplets line right there. That's the line that really generates the for Tampa. And if they're not going, it makes the Stamkos line life a little bit more difficult. And it jumbles things up. And for Tampa, they really could not afford that tonight. And it took them a long while to get going. Once they did, they were okay. But even then, when they got chances, it shocks me to say this, but the guy finds a way. Corey Crawford shuts the door.
Now, I'm going to move away from the Stanley Cup Finals for a second, because obviously the other big news coming out of the NHL this week is the drama. And that's as mild as I can put it. But the drama that once again is taking place in Arizona with the Coyotes franchise. The city of Glendale, 2 years after signing that 15-year, $225 million lease agreement, decided to vote it down and to renegotiate a new lease for the arena. And the way it happened was so haphazardly bad that right now viral on YouTube is that female fan berating the mayor of Glendale, which is nothing but pure unadulterated delight to me, because if there is officially now the gang that can't shoot straight, it's the city government of Glendale. And I got to ask you, Chris, why? Just why? Why would the city of Glendale do something like this, which probably cost the Coyotes franchise millions of dollars, as soon as the vote was taken?
Look, this is one of the worst ran city halls I think I've seen since my hometown, of course, which is probably takes the cake for being the worst. By the way, we're the town that had a slam dunk deal with the New Jersey Devils and managed to blow it because we didn't want to remove some quote unquote lesser income housing. So yeah, I've been there. So for the people of Glendale, I do understand that want the Coyotes. But here's the problem. From the beginning, this was an awful idea. It really was. To put an arena in Glendale where they did, with the businesses, the way they had them set up, nobody goes to them anyway. That's the kicker in all this. The only time they ever did was when Glendale had the Super Bowl and some team in New York, you get the idea, won the whole thing. And football seemed to generate the income that hockey isn't there. And it's unfair. Look, this is a bad situation all around. It's not going to get any better. It's just going to get uglier. Obviously, Arizona filed an injunction so they could basically stay in the arena. It's one that, look, there's no rhyme or reason for this, and there's no excuse for what happened. The city of Glendale opted basically for their own out clause on their own deal that they agreed to. People have to understand this. They outed their own out clause. That's pretty scary. The fact that they actually pulled this off. And look, it doesn't matter whether you want them out of Arizona, the team belongs there or not. There are fans here, and there's people that are going to lose their jobs over this because they dragged this out for so long. And instead of somehow trying to find a way much sooner to have an arena in Phoenix that's easier to get to, they just let this drag out so long, and now it's only going to get uglier.
Now, I'm going to pass this to my colleague Drew, because I think, Drew, there is a correlation with this with regards to stuff that happened with your original Cleveland Browns, not the reincarnated version. So, your thoughts on the what's it called again?
Well, Nick, I got to play a little devil's advocate on this. I don't fully agree with you guys. Here's problem one. The city of Glendale was losing money every year on this deal. Every year they lose money. And there's been a lot of negative backlash within the city because of it, because that's taxpayer dollars that have to be, charged to the people. And then and to basically supplement keeping a team there that isn't really generating revenue for Glendale. Second, the viral video you're talking about with that berating fan, she's not even a resident of Glendale. She doesn't have to pay that money. Did I say Glendale? I can't even speak right. It makes my blood boil a little bit that a fan, I understand fandom, fanatic. A fan from Phoenix is the one coming on and being the poster child. She doesn't even pay any of this tax revenue that goes right to offset the losses that are coming from having the Coyotes in this deal. So I don't blame Glendale for trying to get out of this. It's a bad business deal. You're losing money every year. You get out of the deal. You find another way. So you use the out clause that was built in, not for the reason they used it, but they used it because they had to. And now see what happens. If nothing happens, well, at least they won't lose that 1.52 million plus. I don't even know the exact number. I think it's actually closer to 4 or 5 or something like that. You might need to correct that. But either way, that's public sector dollars from the residents that are going away that can save. I know there's other cities, Las Vegas and Seattle, that would love to have the Coyotes. This may be just a opportunity for, you know what, the deal's not good for you. I understand why. We're going to look elsewhere. Thanks for the memories, and walk away. And you were talking about with Cleveland. Cleveland's deal a little bit different in the fact of the team was bought on borrowed money to begin with. So this was kind of stemming for a while. And the Browns had a chance at a new stadium with the Gateway deal that built now Progressive Field and Quicken Loans Arena. They turned it down. So they did have an out there, but unlike here where this was a legal move done by the city in the contract, this was legally done. What happened in Cleveland was illegal. It's why it went to court and all that other settlement nonsense, and why we have the idea now where teams keep their history and colors and all this other jazz. But in short, I don't agree with you guys. I think this is a bad deal for Glendale. They had to get out of it before they kept hemorrhaging more money.
Right. The problem with the deal originally was they had a 5-year out clause, and that's probably what's going to be argued in the courts in some way. Now, there was some very, Drew, I would say extremely very fine print in this deal. I mean, it's basically 331 pages. I remember this when it was originally agreed on. Sarah McClellan, who reports for the Arizona Republic, has been covering this from minute one. As she put it to me, she's like, the biggest problem with Glendale was they had chances to get out of this from the beginning, and they chose now to take it. I think that's the biggest problem for people. Instead of voting on what they did 2 years ago, which they knew they were going to lose money, somebody had to have some kind of common sense on the city council back then to say, hey, we're going to lose a lot of money on this anyway. Why are we agreeing to this? And yet they did. That may be the bigger indictment. And fans are thinking, well, at least we have 5 years. Well, the reality is if they had gone back and looked at this thing, they really didn't. It was actually only 2 years. The money lost, about more than a third of that is actually because of one bad contract, ironically. If you look at the amount that they lost, I think it's 34 to 36 million. 13.5 million of that, guys, is just because they had to buy out Mike Ribeiro's contract because, well, he was a frickin' drunk. I mean, that's the only way to describe it. They actually had to buy out his deal. And that's why they lost as much money as they did this year. And somewhat because of the deal that they made, which hurt them short term. So, look, it's one of those things. I never agreed on them having an arena in Glendale from minute one. It wasn't a good deal even then. The arena they had in downtown Phoenix was just fine. They were just trying to make an extra. The old owner, Jerry Moyes, was trying to make an extra buck, and it backfired so completely on him that he's basically penniless now. So, look, there's no easy solution here. It will get uglier. I fully expect it to get uglier. But I do think eventually, if there's one out that the Coyotes have, it's this new downtown proposed arena in Phoenix. If that falls through, then, well, God help us all.
Well, here's the other thing, though, and this is the one thing that really makes this much more uglier than it is. The esteemed commissioner of the NHL, Sir Gary Bettman, pretty much has said that there is no way in hell that the state of Arizona is losing a hockey team. And we all know, how many times, when Jerry Moyes put him into bankruptcy, that he was actually looking to get rid of the team and to bring them back, to maybe send them to another location, and who remembers, Jim Basile, the head of Research in Motion, was trying to get them to go to Hamilton, Ontario, and stuff like that. Look, it's it's just not viable anymore. No matter where you put them in Arizona, it's just not viable. Whether they're in Phoenix, they're in Glendale, they're in Tucson, Pima, wherever they may be. It's not going to be a viable franchise at all in Arizona. And Gary Bettman is so hell-bent on keeping this team there, he has no idea what type of, hell that is about to go through in this lawsuit with the city of Glendale and the Arizona Coyotes. A lot of the legal pundits have come out and said that the Arizona Coyotes are going to win at this lawsuit. I totally get that.
Even if they win, they lose.
What's the cost?
The cost is immeasurable, actually. It really is. There is no price tag that you can put on the cost of what this is going to entail. My favorite quote is still from Bob McKenzie. Kind of had this couple nights ago on TSN, and he had gotten it from, I believe it was a journalist from Sportsnet. Gary Bettman, and I quote on the Arizona situation, "I stake my legacy on it."
I stake my legacy on it.
What legacy at this point?
Exactly.
That's to say something about his legacy, because let's be honest, he doesn't have the best of legacies at all when it comes to commissioners. So.
No, and something that has to be sort of addressed here, and it's basically the elephant in the room. If you staked your sports, say, cost certainty on the Canadian dollar, that was a bad move. That was a really bad move. The only thing that's kind of saving the NHL right now is the fact that despite mediocre budgets, the NHL in the 48 contiguous states is at least doing a better job per what they call per team money value as far as profits than in Canada. Sure, Canada generates the ratings, et cetera, and such, but there are some numbers that have come out between the NBA and NHL finals that would make any hockey fan sick. And it has to be at least a big part on Gary Bettman for having the tunnel vision to include Comcast in anything that remotely works.
It's Comcraptic.
I'm telling you. See, Nick, somebody agrees with me.
Oh, Comcast.
A lot of people
sucks.
actually do. It's bad. Look, I'm paying $172 a month for Comcast. Okay, I mean. I have to say, it's awful, and the deal is awful. I mean, NBC got a sweethearted deal. They can basically relegate hockey to however they want to. That's not even the only thing. You look at some of the rules that are in place, and some of the, just everything seems to be always tinkered with, and yet nothing seems to work. Well, for example, the shootout. Now we're going to go to something probably next year that actually will work that should have been tried several years ago. I mean, it's not good. Gary Bettman doesn't really have much of a legacy other than being a yes man to the owners. That's his basic legacy. Some will say he did what he could, this and that, but he's a lawyer, and he can twist things all he wants. You have flatline revenues, guys, in the league right now. Revenues have flatlined. That's why the salary cap is where it is. The only reason why it's going up next year, even a couple million, is because the players agreed that they get more taken out of their paychecks to put the 5% inflator in. If it didn't, could you imagine the mass craziness and uncertainty of the cap dropping $1.5 million for teams like Chicago, the Rangers, the Bruins, the Flyers. You see where this is going, guys? All big market teams that spent too much. Gary can't have that.
Well, the NHL's got to be real careful because the MLS is on their tail and coming up quick. And I think Bettman needs to take some notes from the MLS and how to take a fledgling league and start making it work, because the MLS is hot. I mean, and not just product, and product is product, but how they're running their business. And that's where the NHL is falling flat on their face. It's how they run their business. And Major League Soccer, which is, a second-tier sport in America, is starting to put up some top-tier numbers. They're starting to rival the NBA as far as dollars coming in. So you got to be really nervous if you're the NHL falling to fifth in the pecking order in American sports. And if they keep it up, the Arena Football League would be more than happy to take the torch and work their way up. I love hockey. I love going to the games. It's a lot of fun. But the politics of it is so sickening, it almost tunes me out.
It's rather archaic, isn't it, when you think about how bad the politics are in hockey?
Oh, it's terrible. But I did want to throw one more thing before you head out for the night. I don't know if you heard, but this came about 4 hours ago. An Arizona Coyotes fan, and I'm quoting this from the AP, got to take out her frustration on the mayor behind the decision to send the hockey team packing, because they were doing a fundraiser, and Glendale Mayor Jerry Weirs said as part of the charity pledge, if someone pledged $10,000, they could tase him, and they did. Rhonda Pearson, very disgruntled fan, came with a $10,000 money order and got to tase him in front of people to show that frustration.
Hey, when you got to enact your fantasy from a Cops episode, I guess you got to do it.
All righty. Nick, why don't you start wrapping us up for the night?
Absolutely. So, Chris, I want to thank you, as always, for joining us this evening. Once again, why don't you remind the Mad Scientist Sports faithful out there where they can find you on social media?
Folks, you can always find me on Twitter at Chris Wassel DFS. In the fall, you'll be able to find me on Hockey This Week on Yahoo Sports Radio. It sounds scary, but it's true. You'll also be able to, as always, find me on Project Roto. I'll be doing their fantasy guide this summer, and we'll be doing some fun articles during the dog days of hockey, or the dog days of hockey off season, talking about the draft, free agency, all that fun stuff. Also over at Dauber Hockey and today's Slapshot. And don't forget, we'll be in Vegas doing the program during sometime around the NHL Awards, so you'll want to listen to that. It's going to be a very strange yet fun show. Guaranteed to have a few people along the way. And, yeah, we'll have a little more on that Arizona thing, I'm sure, because it's like watching that South Park episode, the reality series Earth. It never really ends, guys.
So thank you very much, Chris, and talk to you soon, okay?
All right, guys, you have a good one.
And that was Chris Wassel from Project Roto, once again giving us his insights into the NHL as well as the Stanley Cup Finals. Drew, another outstanding episode for us here on the Mad Scientist Sports Lab. Let the good people know where they can find my trusted assistant.
Well, you can find me on Twitter at StatBoyDrew and on the litany of networks that rebroadcast this wonderful program. Nick, to you.
That's right, Drew. Perfect segue, because not only can you listen live here every Saturday night, but we're also syndicated on the following I-95 Sports and Entertainment Network, led by Blackjack Bobby Galante. War Room Sports, led by Devin McMillan and B. Austin and Jimmy Williams. Happy Hour Network, led by Lee Vowell, Todd Vandenberg, and Ted Hicks. The Arena Sports Network, led by the Snowman himself, Brian Snow. Die Hard Sports Radio, led by Steve Iskowitz. Sports for Fans, led by Sean Stewart. the Ace Network, led by Alex Cardinale. The Sports Crave by Noah Miller. Nuts and Bolts Sports for my good friends down in North Carolina. Hey, Joe, how you doing? Late Night Sports Radio, led by Keith Grieve. And last but certainly not least, the Asylum Sports Network by the Ricks, Flieger and Briggs. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Old networks get to listen to me, Andrew, pontificate about sports every week. With that being said, my name is Nick Ficcarelli. I am the Mad Scientist of Sports. You can find me on Twitter at NAF_FSW Sports. We will be back live next Saturday night, 10 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Pacific Time, right here on Blog Talk Radio. Until then, time to shut down the beacons, time to erase the blackboard, and time to get some new test subjects to come rolling in through that door. Until then, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening to us this evening. Have a good night.